I see now, Tristan. Speaking of special crafts, it looks like you're doing conservation work. I know exactly what that former artifact was. You dropped it. No,
I'm having control issues. I thought I lost the knife.
Oh my gosh, Tristan.
No.
You're a terrible contractor and you're a terrible conservator. You
Just
cannot drop the artifact. We're alive. Welcome, everyone, to Archaeology Arcade, the online program of the Florida Public Archaeology Network. I'm one of two co-hosts for this program. I'm Mike. I'm based out of our coordinating center, which is located in what is now, for us anyways, very cold Pensacola, Florida. And joining me, as always, is my co-host and colleague and co-conspirator and probably a bunch of other stuff, is Tristan out of our office in Tallahassee. Tristan, how are you going, and how's the rust on this? It's been a while.
Good. Yeah, no, it's good to be back, and very good in warm Tallahassee. So
warm Tallahassee. And also joining us from Tallahassee, Florida, is a special guest that's perfect for this game, is Shannon Kuch. She is the executive director of the Tallahassee Trust for Historic Preservation. Shannon, welcome.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me, guys. I'm looking forward to this. Going to be fun.
Yep.
Yeah, it's so good to have you. We're so excited to learn more about what you all do at the Tallahassee Trust. But I have a very important question for you, and that is, are you a gamer at all? Do you game?
Oh, I was hoping that I would not be able to make it obvious for an hour and kind of skirt by, but man, you really just called me right out front and center. So I can't hide from this. I'll say I'll really enjoy watching you all game. I will watch people game. I have two small children who will game all day, so I'm in a gaming environment. But I'm more of an observer. We'll put it that way.
Sure. That's totally okay. And what's great about this program is most of our guests actually are not gamers. So Tristan and I, I've been a gamer for a long time, although I've had much less time.
Cool.
I have two kids too, so they kind of took over the video game
duties.
Consoles.
Yeah.
Passing the torch, yes.
Yeah, that's cool. But this is a perfect
I'm an old school, like, Super Nintendo gamer. You want to talk historic, that's me.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that is not historic, with my age. I don't feel like I'm that old, Yeah, I'm totally Super Nintendo, NES, original one. Even Sega. I had the original Sega. Atari. I remember when I was real little, Atari was still around. So that was
yes.
but yeah, this should be a fun game. But speaking of the game, today we are playing this game called Monuments Flipper. We are actually just playing the demo. So there's a full version. I believe the full version is now out, and I think it's early access still.
Yes.
So I guess we're still working on kinks and things like that. But I'm going to give a quick description of this game, and then we'll go ahead and get into the gameplay. But it's, again, called Monuments Flipper. The description of it, this is just right off Steam where you can find this game. It says, become a monument renovator. Monuments Flipper is a game in which you play the role of a professional monument renovator. You choose from among the world's greatest monuments, restore them to their former glory, and learn about history and architecture. It was recently released November 14th, 2022. Developer is Monuments Game and Game Incubator, and it's published by Games Incubator and Playway SA. So, with that said, are you two ready? This is actually Tristan, it's been a while since Tristan and I have done Archaeology Arcade. We were in Lisbon, so we saw some amazing architecture in Lisbon, Portugal.
Amazing.
In January, and then we just had a whole bunch of work to catch up on. But yeah, now we're happy to be back. We may be rusty, but this is episode number 45. All right, so here we are in the office.
It's loading in right now. But
it's loading. Is this how your office looks, Shannon, in Tallahassee? Is it like this?
I will say the plant is true to life. Those Florida ceiling windows are not, though.
And
maybe you need a monument renovator.
Yeah, exactly. We are in a nice little historic bungalow in Tallahassee in a little historic district. So it's a little bit of a different time period, but that's got a nice European feel. I think we were looking at Notre Dame or something.
Yeah, we'll see. This isn't taking place in France, at least the demo is.
It's in France.
I
assume that's an ocean view, but looks like a void.
Beautiful.
Or maybe that's
not outside my window.
No.
That's the demo version. They just haven't put that part in there yet. I see we have some architecture on the walls. Cool.
Yep.
And I guess we have to pick a project. I think that's what we have.
Yeah,
to
there's
do.
only one available to us in the demo, but I think that'll be plenty.
Yeah, that would
for
be
us.
fine.
So here's our
And then
map with some of the other things they have.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there is a, no, that's locked. Okay.
Uh-huh.
But Old Village is where they send us.
That's where we're going to go. So that's where
Yeah.
we got to go pick and do some renovations. Okay. In order to start a mission, you have to read the documents first. I just want to also really quickly say we have a few people that are joining us right now live on Twitch. And so welcome to everybody who's on there right now. If you have any questions throughout this gameplay, feel free to use that chat box, that chat feature on Twitch, and let us know if you have questions or comments, and we're always happy to engage with everybody. So,
Yep.
Welcome.
So it's an old resident and a barn and a hunting lodge, and we were supposed to renovate it for a mini museum. Talks about repairing the roof.
Okay, got some roof damage.
Covering it with shingles.
Yeah, we know about that in Florida. Have to always replace our roofs.
That's
right.
my day-to-day regulation is roof work.
Oh yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about. So you're executive director of the Tallahassee Trust for Historic Preservation. Can you tell us a little bit about you all?
Yeah, so we unfortunately are not out in the field getting to do the hands-on projects like we're going to get to do virtually today, it looks like. But the cool thing is that we are out in the community in terms of regulation. So all the registered historic sites that we have in our area, we get to deal with all of the property owners with that and the repairs that they're making and the different levels of preservation that they're working on. And then we get to do outreach and education events like you guys get to focus on with FPAN, which is so awesome. So we overlap in some of the ways that you guys do, and we're always trying to think of new ways to get out there. And this seems to be one of the coolest concepts I have seen, and I'm definitely going to make my kids watch this later, and they're going to love it.
Yeah, we'll have to get all
they're
your...
going to finally understand what I do.
Right. We'll have to see how accurate this is based on your experience too. We find a
Yeah.
lot of the archaeology-based games we play typically aren't very accurate. Although I did see that we had to hire we had to hire an archaeologist for this.
We did have to
project.
hire an archaeologist, yes.
Fantastic.
So do you all work with archaeologists at all in the work that you do with the Tallahassee Trust?
We do. We actually we have a diverse board that has archaeologists on it, and we do have some local register archaeological sites in Leon County. And so we work with our local authorities to try to, preserve and work with any reporting that's going on. Definitely underrepresented in what we work with. We do work mostly with buildings, but archaeology and cemeteries are always so fascinating to people and definitely underrepresented in what we work with.
Yeah. So you said it's mostly building. And so can you tell us a little bit about what protects some of the buildings, at least in Tallahassee? Like, do you have local ordinances?
Yeah.
You work with governments? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we're part of the federal certified local government program, which is through the National Park Service, which is where we get our Secretary of Interior standards that guide all of the work that we do for preservation. And so that guides the local register of historic places. So we do have a registry of several hundred properties in Tallahassee and Leon County, and those are subject to an ordinance. So unlike this game where it looks like we can just, do the work and throw it together and it's looking good, if you were doing that where I was, we'd ask you to get a permit first and apply for a special certificate. So for the historic structures, we do have an ordinance that protects them and guides the work that we do. But in the interesting thing in Leon County is we mainly only regulate the exterior of buildings. So I love that they're trying to do this. It sounds like maybe an adaptive reuse for a museum using this building that you guys are working on as something different.
Yeah.
Where are we going with here?
Looks like we got an axe.
We are just going to break down these planks, I think.
Well, maybe they're not historic. Maybe they're like more recent. So you mentioned adaptive reuse. Can you explain what that is? So people who may not know.
Yes. It's super fun and cool and popular, and we love it. Adaptive reuse is one of my favorite forms of historic preservation. So think about, a good one in Tallahassee is Bar 1903, which is in the historic Walker Library. So as the names imply, it was traditionally a library, and now it's a bar. With the same character defining outside, looks like a library from the outside, and they kept a lot of the features on the inside. It's adapting a building to something that it was not traditionally used for and making it a new use. All over the country, well, all over the world, there's of course in Europe, there's tons of examples because development has occurred so closely within areas where people just switch over from retail to, people living in close quarters with commercial and retail and all sorts of different uses. But in the States, there's some really interesting examples out west, like Portland and Austin have some interesting examples of places like jails or schools that have been turned into restaurants or banks. Very quirky, interesting reuse. And another example that's happening in Tallahassee is we have our old city utilities, our old waterworks is right now being adaptively rehabilitated into a brewery and restaurant.
Oh, so, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. It's putting new life into these cool old structures.
Yeah. So it maintains the historic character and the architecture. And obviously, people still need to have jobs and places to live. But it's not like a, kind of cookie cutter design like you see with these new developments where, nothing's historic and there's no real character. But I also imagine it's probably good for the environment, right? I mean, you're reusing
absolutely
old material, which is what Tristan, it looks like you're doing. Are those roof shakes, or is that what those are? It's kind of hard to tell from the screen. Yeah. Like at least what I'm looking at is a little.
So it was having me just destroy the beams that had fallen in.
Oh, you just destroyed them?
Just destroy them, I guess. And I think now we're going to crack broken tiles.
Yeah, I guess you can't reuse. You can't reuse everything, right? I mean, in some instances, I'm sure if it's like structural integrity like that, that may be you have to put in a new beam. Real it's going to hold the building up.
Mike, how's the frame rate on the stream?
On the stream, it looks okay. On the what we're looking at on Zoom's not great. I mean, I can kind of tell what's happening, but on the stream, at least. As far as I can tell, it looks okay.
All right.
So Shannon, it might be kind of hard to see, but like the final product will look okay.
Good. So I just wanted to check.
Well, in my pixels, yeah, it does look like a shake roof, and that is interesting because we are dealing with all sorts of changes in materials on historic properties. Mm-hmm. So I bet if they were having you rebuild that, I mean, they might do things a little differently in Europe, but I just this week approved it's not a cedar shake roof to go back on, but a simulated, a new material, a synthetic material. It's a metal shingle that looks like that from a distance. So we deal with all sorts of interesting things to make buildings modern, usable, and keep their historic character. So
right. And I'm sure like cedar shakes aren't cheap too. I'm sure super expensive. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of things like with new materials. You're saying, one of our sayings is the greenest house is the one already built. So definitely much better for the environment to do rehabilitation work. But, sometimes we can take advantage of some of the modern technologies and newer materials that'll make things either more sustainable or last longer or just, an improvement overall. So,
are you finding that people are more open now to restoring buildings versus I think kind of the older version was developers wanted to just come in and then knock a building down and put something brand new up. Have you noticed any change in that, or is there still some pushback?
Yeah, I think we go through different, periods of development of people wanting new and wanting to preserve. And what we've seen, at least locally, is in Tallahassee and some of our districts, is people For instance, we have a district where there's larger houses that were subdivided, houses that were built around the 1900s, and they were subdivided around World War II into boarding houses. And now they're returning back into residential. They had gone commercial into offices and things like that. And where normally what we would be seeing is these districts would be getting completely razed and redeveloped, we're seeing people go back into them, live in them, restore these districts to residential. So there really were some strange and unintended consequences of the last few years. We thought that with people moving out of buildings, with losing office space, that we would see a lot of buildings, fall into disrepair, but the use of them has really just changed. So that's been interesting.
Yeah. And then you mentioned some of the projects earlier that you all have been involved in. Is there anything going on right now that are worth mentioning, you think? I'm sure there's a lot. It's probably hard to pick.
Yeah, we are constantly working. We deal a lot with residential. So folks are constantly trying to repair windows, trying to repair roofs. It looks like the things that you're trying to do in this game, like just the normal standard stuff. But we are seeing a lot of development on the edge of some of our historic districts. So that's been really interesting to regulate the mix of historic and modern. Let me see some of the other, we have had some good adaptive reuses lately. Some of our coastal communities nearby, we've had Carabel just won a preservation award. They did exactly, I think, what you're doing here, restoring a building for a museum.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It was their old city hall. So we have some places like that have been doing some good work. I'm trying to think of my list. The brewery is the big one that we're watching right now. That's the biggest rehabilitation that has gone on that's been come through our board in a long time. So that's really neat to see them go from, that was a shell of a building, just completely vacant, needed complete rehabilitation. But then another interesting one is we also have sites like Goodwood Museum and Gardens, which is a complex of historic buildings, and they're constantly working on maintenance and things like that. So they're going through a cycle of where they just reconstructed a portion of their historic water tower. Same sort of thing with the synthetic materials. They had that synthetic shake roof. So it's that mix of we're finding where the historic and the modern meet, and the materials and the sustainability. And they're working on some other projects on their grounds. So just another really big historic site that we're trying to keep up and maintain with, that we regulate with the trust.
That's fantastic.
About what else we have on our docket.
and then
we're constantly busy.
Just always busy. That's good. It's good to be busy. So
Absolutely.
Can you kind of walk us through this? I know you said you guys mainly with the trust deal with the regulations and making sure things are being done properly, and not so much with the hands-on stuff. But can you kind of take us through the process? Let's say I buy a historic building, maybe in a district, and I want to restore it. What does that process look like?
Perfect. So that would trigger, probably, depending on the work you want to do, what's called our Architectural Review Board process, our ARB. So I'm the staff representative for that. And we do have a board that is comprised of folks from all different backgrounds. We have historic architects, we have historic property owners, different experts in the field. And what they do is, if you bought a historic home and you want to do renovations to the exterior of it, you're going to meet with that board and you're going to show them your plans, and they're going to let you know what is and isn't historically, appropriate for keeping the historic character of that home. So we offer a lot of technical assistance beforehand, before it triggers that whole meeting process. We love talking to realtors, prospective buyers, people who bought a house and didn't know what this was gonna, what to do. What do I do with this historic house? We love those questions. So people think that buying a historic property is limiting. I think it's very freeing. It opens you up to all sorts of possibilities of what you can do to tell the past story of that structure and have it go forward and be preserved for future life and use. I mean, what better use is there than being in a building and using it and having it being lived in and loved in? So.
Yeah, and they're all unique. I mean, especially these historic buildings, they all have those stories of past people who lived in them, and in terms of the architecture and versus a new build that all they can not to say anything bad about new buildings. I'm sure some of them look great, but they do all kind of look the same. If I go down to over in Walton County where I live at, like some of these beach communities. They're nice, but they all look exactly alike versus like downtown Pensacola or downtown Tallahassee, where you get this real, very, very architecture in terms of different styles. Yeah, totally. So yeah, and that is a common comment that I hear a lot too. Just working in public archaeology, when I engage people in the public and the topic of historic buildings comes up, that's the exact sentiment is like, oh, well, I don't want someone telling me how to, what color I can paint my house. But doesn't a lot of it kind of, so I know some districts are more restrictive than others, right? I mean, some of them
right.
So can you talk about a little bit about like what are historic districts and what do they do?
Yes. So what we say is preservation happens on the local level. So like you pointed out, every single place has different local ordinances. And within whatever your local district is, so for Tallahassee and Leon County, we deal with the whole county. Some places it's the city that you're in or however it's broken up. And then within that, you'll have like regulated districts. So we have residential districts and commercial districts and things like that. And so there are the basic general guidelines that are the national standards, those Secretary of the Interior standards. But at the local level, then you have the ordinances guiding those. So the area that we're in Leon County has a pretty short ordinance. But you go somewhere like, I want to say St. Augustine or New Orleans is a great example. If you walk by any building in New Orleans that's getting work done, look in the French Quarter. It will have paperwork taped many, many, many pages to the front of the building. And that's what they have to notice people. So they have, they will regulate the nail that you use.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So most places are not, there's a broad spectrum of, how stringent the places are. But I think the overall message is it's not hysterical preservation. It's historic preservation. And that's the message that we're always trying to bring forth is we want to work with you. We want these buildings to be preserved. We want to do everything we can to help keep the historic fabric and sense of place. And we need these buildings to be utilized in order to do that. So, we try to work preservation up to the best standards that we can and work within the realistic limitations that we do have. And I will say some other places may, but Leon County does not regulate paint.
They don't.
So that's the number one question I get. Yeah, is you're going to tell me what to paint my house? And we say, no, we aren't. Yeah. So
which is kind of interesting because like I would think like the color of the paint is the easiest thing to like change. Right. It's like
exactly. Yeah, people get scared, and that's our main rule of thumb is if it can be reversed and it's not permanently adverse to a structure, that's when it's usually an okay thing to do.
Right. And now, I mean, obviously, yeah, right. Yeah. And now, obviously, like you're very passionate about historic preservation. Can you tell us a little bit about like what got you into this field?
Yes. So I grew up, my dad was a history teacher. And so I just grew up surrounded by, these were all of our field trips were things like what we're looking at on the screen, like field trips, I say, because he actually was my teacher, but our vacations were to places like this. Yeah, it was always learning. So, we spent a lot of time in places like St. Augustine and going to the different sites that we have around town and things like that. So I just grew up with a great appreciation for our built environment and the history that surrounds us and that we get to see and touch and interact with every day, and the stories that holds. So I was fortunate enough, I got to go to school for all of that. I went to Florida State University for history in undergrad, and then I didn't really know much about preservation and that it was its own field. And so I got a master's it's called Historical Administration and Public History, and did some specialization in historic preservation, and have been so fortunate. I worked with the state for a while, and now I'm getting to work on the local level. I've worked on most levels of preservation, government-wise, and it's a learning process. It's so fascinating. When they say you learn something new every day, I literally call someone at some point every single day and say, please answer this question for me.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's hard to know like everything, especially when you're talking about different ordinances and regulations, for sure. That's sure. Amazing. So that's great. I mean, people can, who are interested, they can actually go and get a degree in this field. And so
absolutely.
What sorts of jobs can you kind of tell us about? I mean, obviously we know you could be the executive director of Tallahassee Trust for Historic Preservation if you're amazing, and you work really hard. What other kinds of jobs can you get in this field?
Absolutely. So historic preservationists work all over the place. They work, like I said, in all levels of government. There are every state has a historic preservation office. Florida's is one of the biggest ones. And fortunately, where we are in Tallahassee, we have the capital. And so we actually have our state office here. So I'm super lucky to get to work with all of our state preservationists. So they tap into a great national network as well. And then there's the private sector who we work hand in hand with. And there's folks who are like architectural historians who do things like go out and do, when we say survey, I know archaeologists and architectural historians, that means something totally different for us. Mm-hmm. So we have, folks who can go out in the field and record buildings and built structures and things like that. So there's lots of private sector things that can be done. And then there's all sorts of cultural organizations. There's, like, for example, we're the Tallahassee Trust. There's the Florida Trust for Historic Preservation. There's also a nonprofit side to it, which is the Tallahassee Trust is really interesting. We actually wear two hats where we do the regulatory services with the federal government program with the certified local government, but we also have a nonprofit side. So we do all sorts of, education and outreach. So anywhere that you think that you might fit into the preservation equation, whether it's as a crafts person, we work with all types of, like you're doing on the game here, all types of interesting folks in the construction industry to folks who are working at all different levels on the government. So all sorts of things.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're into policy, there's a place for you. But if you're really into working with your hands, you can be like Tristan and jump on a roof and put on some shakes.
Right.
On a roof.
There you go.
Some gaping
it's
holes
fun for everyone.
Yeah.
We might not rehire you the second time. So your career in that might not be too long.
I got paid.
Yeah. I see no lot of safety issues I see here. You don't have a harness on. I mean, there might be some OSHA violations happening here.
A few violations. Roof. There we go.
Yeah.
What a good roof I've been there.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, right?
Wonderful, beautiful.
Just lets the water in, like natural flowing water. Right. You can just put a couple buckets
little
out.
Skylight.
Yeah. I see you haven't picked up.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Tristan, I would not issue you a certificate of completion for that. I apologize, but you would not pass inspection. So.
Did he use the right kind of nails on his shakes, or those are proper ones?
I don't know about that.
Just had me slap them down.
Something went wrong here.
Yeah. Right. I also feel like maybe instead of using like those old beaten up shakes, maybe just go with that new material that Shannon was mentioning.
Yeah, it had me. It actually had me renovate some, which basically included wiping them with a cloth, which probably wasn't enough.
Right. Especially if this is going to be a museum, I feel like,
right.
Climate control should probably be something of concern.
Probably have
that you
some
need to
artifacts
address.
and stuff. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think buckets sitting out Although I will say that when we were in Lisbon, I had a couple of my colleagues who went to some museums that were historic buildings. I mean, some of them were really old, but some of the ones they went to, it rained a lot when they were there, and so I don't know if it maybe just doesn't rain that much in Lisbon, but apparently, according to them, anyways. Several of these places had buckets out to catch the water dripping.
Oh no!
But I mean, it's they're building for us old buildings here in Florida. It's like 100 years old. It's an old building over there. It's like this castle's from 1,000 years ago. So I guess it's all relative, right. Maybe. Is
exactly. I don't think they freak out as much. Stick a bucket under it. You're fine for a little while. This building's not collapsing. It's not going anywhere.
We got plenty of castles. It's not going anywhere. It's withstood sieges.
There you go.
Stuff. Yeah. And so you did mention a couple of times. You mentioned certified local governments. Can you talk about like what that is and what they do?
Yes. So that is a program administered through the National Park Service. So it's the Department of Interior where we get our funding from. And they work with the different states. So like our state Division of Historical Resources passes through that federal program to the state. So then our different certified local governments, oh gosh, I want to say we have 80 some in Florida. I'm not sure because there can be more than one per county. But there's a huge network of them. And it is just fascinating and wonderful to work with them. So one, it offers access to grant funding, which is super important. Of course, how we get most of our work done. But then they also offer lots and lots of resources, and they are what governs the guideline. We do have to meet certain standards about our Architectural Review Board meeting and adhering to the different ordinances and preservation standards. But in terms of the day-to-day, it offers wonderful resources, like there's a big listserv on there. So different preservation professionals can just, back and forth. This is what we're dealing with in my district. This is what we're seeing on my board. Somebody beat me to a question the other day. I was going to ask something about solar panels, and I go to check, and there's a list of like 10 things. Well, that wasn't me.
Apparently, someone else is building this roof for me. I didn't do a very good job last time.
Look at that. I told you they would not rehire you. No. I'm sorry.
Revoke his license, his contractor license.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, CLGs are great programs. And like you said, I mean, a lot of the incentive, I mean, other than like some of the issues that we talked about in terms of being better for the environment, or it can continue to keep the historic character of a neighborhood intact. You mentioned grant money. So people who have these historic homes that fall within these historic districts that you mentioned, and that maybe happen to be within the certified local government. So then there's funding that they can get through these programs. Can you tell us how that kind of works?
Possibly. So it depends on what the building is, what the use is. There is a big difference between, private residential, and then most of the things that would be funded through the state in the CLG program would be public entities, like universities and nonprofits and things of that nature. However, the CLG program does open communities up to be able to participate in, if their own communities wish to participate in, local level funding. So on top of the state funding that we are allowed access to as a CLG, we in Tallahassee have a Historic Preservation Grant and Loan Program that is just run through our city. So our city puts up funds for private property owners to go above and beyond maintaining their historic character of their homes. So that I can only speak to Tallahassee and Leon County for that one. But every CLG does have the ability to have a program like that. So many have similar programs.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely an incentive for people to want to restore and maintain these buildings. Tristan, I do have a question for you.
Shoot.
I saw you throw away a bunch of things. Are you sure none of those were artifacts?
No.
Uh-oh. And what's the deal
What
with
are
those
in
jugs?
these mystery bags?
He was throwing stuff away.
There was a lot of looked like modern garbage in there, and so it just had me pick it up. But your question is a good one. Is this actually part of the site or not? Because people make assumptions about that, and they end up throwing out something sometimes that they should not be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, was it trash or treasure?
Yeah.
What is it saying? One person's trash is another person's treasure. Right?
Well, the most important stuff in archaeology is trash. So
that's right. Yeah. And so, what's the deal? But the jugs, you left the jugs in place.
I do not know. I assume
what's that about?
It's going to have a purpose at some point.
Is that because these are art? I mean, these are definitely these are artifacts.
They
sure
look like it. Yeah. So that.
But they also it's a little inaccurate because how often do you find full vessels?
Well, complete ones. Yeah, not very often, ones. For sure.
Yeah,
not if there's been people messing around in the house too. Those almost always get smashed. It seems. Yeah.
And so they hired an
this type of roof work.
Yep.
Yeah, right. And I mean, they apparently we hired an archaeologist. Do we know like how we're utilizing that individual?
I have no idea actually. I think there was some bonuses or something, but there's the roof. I don't know if that's that much better than me actually.
Yeah. Is this the one you completed that you restored?
The one I hired someone to do apparently.
Oh, you hired one. Yeah, they did a much better job than you.
Yeah.
And Shannon, you mentioned working with I guess contractors. Are there people that can you just hire any contract, like any construction contractor, or is that like a special license to do that for like specifically for historic buildings?
We don't require one. It's possible that there are places that do. So we tend to get the same groups of contractors over and over again, just because we're in a smaller community, kind of like the same types of architects. If that's your interest is preservation, we'll get people who realize that, okay, these are the types of projects. They do require a little more, a different route. And so there are people who want to build themselves as specialists in that, and they know our process and they go through it and they do good work and they do a good job. So, we're always happy to have folks like that. But it has been harder in recent times finding skilled craftspeople to do a lot of the traditional work that we have seen on houses before. Have you all encountered anything like that lately about not finding folks to do traditional crafting or work?
Yeah, I mean, again, my experience is limited because I mainly do in like archaeology, but I do sit on a board of a historic cemetery. Mm-hmm. And so we have to work with, we only have a handful of people who we know can really do this particular type of work, because it's not a matter of just hiring like a bricklayer. It's, these people have to really understand the material. Yeah, but they're also knowing the materials that were used historically and using the same sort of material to help bond these bricks. There's only a handful that I know of that we work with anyway. So I'm sure that's not uncommon. So do you know how they, is this something that you go to trade school for? Or is it literally like an apprenticeship? You just kind of, start to work for someone?
I think it depends.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it depends on what the craft is, because I know there was somebody who was doing brickwork who was apprenticing with somebody who had worked on a lot of our historic homes in town. So I think it just depends on what it's for. But I mean, that is a wonderful thing that we do have some of the synthetic and replacement materials that we have, but some of them are appearing simply because it seems that we don't have people to produce the traditional materials. Mm-hmm. So.
And I see now, Tristan, speaking of special crafts, it looks like you're doing conservation work. I know exactly what that former artifact was. You dropped it. No,
I'm having control issues. I thought I lost.
Oh my gosh, Tristan,
oh no!
You're a terrible contractor and you're a terrible conservator. You cannot drop the artifact. That definitely is an artifact. It's hard for me to read the text.
Okay,
Did it say what that was?
Did it do that? So a hunting knife and a lamp.
Okay, well, that is not just
Which one do you want to see?
I don't know about the hunting knife, but I know what that is. That is a Roman oil lamp. That's a Roman period. Exactly what that is. And so if you look at the big hole, that's where they would have filled it up, usually with olive oil, and the little hole they would have put a wick on that side, and then it would have been like a lamp. Okay, so now you're clear. So it didn't break. You dropped it on the ground.
Nope.
I don't know.
It's soft, loamy ground here. It's fine.
I mean, I don't think it's the proper procedures for handling artifacts. I mean, I kind of, this is really problematic, but at least, and actually, another issue is you should not remove the patina.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Artifact.
Yeah.
So that probably what you're removing is soot from when it was, being used.
Now we're going to scrape it with this tool.
I mean, hopefully it's like a very soft tool, like a plastic tool or a wooden
like a
tool.
metal pick, but I can't tell.
I would not recommend using a
no
pick. But yeah, this is totally a Roman lamp. I would say probably like between 1st and 6th century CE. That you can actually date these Roman lamps.
Yeah.
Based on the style. They actually change, their styles change over time. But that, this is cool. Maybe it's from Pompeii. I've seen them. I've seen pictures of Roman lamps from Pompeii that look just like that.
Yeah.
Or very similar.
Oh, and here's our display case.
Okay, so that's why we didn't throw these away. Is we're going to actually use these in the museum exhibit.
I think so. Yes.
Love it.
I mean, that's better than selling these objects to
so there is
restoration.
Yeah.
And some of these games we played, that's actually, there was one we played not too long ago.
It was a museum one. Yeah, it was awful.
It was terrible.
Were we like looters? Oh my gosh. Oh wow.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. And I don't know anything about the dagger. Do you know anything about the dagger?
No, I'm having trouble figuring out.
I do have a question for you, Shannon. So in all the historic preservation work that you've been involved in, have they ever come across like something hidden behind a wall or something like that?
Yes. So I don't know in terms of particular artifacts, but what I've encountered a lot of is rooms that were added onto rooms or things like that when you open up the wall, you can see the interior and the exterior. It's just fascinating. Some of the really old houses will have 3-4 encapsulations around them, and it's just like a completely different house inside of a house, which is, to me, is just fascinating, different time periods. But we did have somebody who there's 2 of them that I've dealt with recently. One was a cornerstone in a foundation that they know something in the 1920s was buried in, some sort of time capsule, but they don't know what it is yet. So they're trying to figure out, how to excavate that. And then I had the reverse, which was somebody who was adding on to a historic farmhouse and buried all of this historic information about the building, the historic farmhouse, into the new addition walls. So they were like, well, when somebody opens this up in 100 years, they're going to find out all about everything. So we find surprises. And then there's the cool things like, where it crosses over into archaeology, anywhere you get the kitchens or the trash or things like that. Mm-hmm. We get all sorts of interesting little tidbits of human life. You guys are the experts on what you find there, but we've found all sorts of interesting things.
So in Pensacola, we have the Pensacola History Museum, and when they were doing renovations, they found a mummified cat. And now that cat is like famous. It's like on display. There's postcards of it. It's when people go to that museum, they're like, I want to see the mummified cat. They literally have it on display.
Yeah.
This poor. I mean, I feel bad.
I've never found anything that cool.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it was a super. Tristan, do you remember like details of? I don't remember all the details.
There's not much to know. It's just kind of a weird thing. It's for some people, some reason grabs people. So that's really all there is to it.
And that museum was adaptively restored. It's the original, or not the original City Hall, but it was originally the City Hall, and they turned it into a museum. So So yeah, who knows the
love
story
it.
behind the cat? And I recently, I had to do some work in one of my house is not a historic house, although in like 20 years it probably will be. But I had to do.
They all will be eventually.
Eventually they will be. You know, I was replacing or I was removing carpet in one of the rooms, and I took the baseboard out, and I found a pencil, the carpenter's pencil, who built the house in 1992. So like I guess he dropped it. He must have dropped it, you know. So, but yeah, it's kind of interesting to find when you crack these walls open. That's interesting. You mentioned that finding like rooms within rooms. Mm-hmm. My grandfather bought a farmhouse up in Ohio, near Cincinnati, and it was kind of falling apart, and he wanted to put a window in it, and he hired a contractor to do that. And this is back in the 80s, and the contractor came and said, "What do you want us to do about that old log cabin?" And he was like, "What log cabin?" And so he took him inside. I guess like they had basically built this farmhouse over this log cabin that was probably built in like 1820. And so, so like it became just a room, because it's like a 1-room log cabin basically. But they just kept adding additions, and eventually it became this bigger house. But the original structure was literally a log cabin. So when you find issues like that, I mean, is it hard sometimes to decide like what portion do you want to preserve versus another section, or what's the is there a consensus on how to kind of handle that?
So there are different forms of preservation. There's rehabilitation, which would be, just leaving everything at the current time period and using it for its current use. But if you're restoring something, restoration, that would be taking it back to its period of significance. So, for example, I'm trying to think of a good one, because Tallahassee, we have the historic Capitol, the old Capitol, that has been restored to its period of significance in the early 1900s. Oh gosh, I should know. I want to say the 1920s, but it's taking everything from the building and making it represent the period of significance, the important time to it. So things can be, historic on their own. They can all be brought together and tied in to tell one story. It really just depends on what the approach is. And sometimes you can just do preservation, which is just stabilization. You can tell the story through multiple, just stabilize it where it is right now and explain what's happened and where it is now. So there's definitely different approaches, but and depending on what approach you take, there are guidelines for it. So it's definitely recognized that it's often not very straightforward.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I guess each case is going to be unique. And I guess it depends also on like what the community wants people to, remember and focus on. And that probably changes over time too. And I see Tristan, you're cleaning up more artifacts.
Trying to.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out what it wants me to do.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you guys must see this with the accuracies of, like, you're seeing how to clean this, and you're saying don't clean it too hard, and don't do that. Yeah, that's exactly what we deal with historic materials.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Secretary's standards are pretty much good guidelines for people to go off of, and those are something that people who are interested in could read about if they wanted to, right?
Absolutely. It can look daunting, but there are so many. Even if you just Google Secretary of Interior standards, most of the work that people do is going to fall under rehabilitation. And, if you have a real technical question, you Google that, and your one little thing that you're trying to look up on your window, you're probably going to get an answer. But if you want to just do some general reading, there's so many wonderful states that have put together just different infographics, basic information about what some of the preservation principles are. There's just some really wonderful resources out there. And I finally have staff. So we're going to be adding to that body of work quite soon with our own information out there. But right now, Google does a really good job covering the basics.
Right. No, and that's awesome. And you all do so much amazing work around Tallahassee area. Can you talk a little bit about how people who want to learn more about the Tallahassee Trust for Historic Preservation, where do they find more information about you all?
Absolutely. So our website is taltrust.org with one L, taltrust.org. And we're online there, but we really have picked up our social media presence lately, and our Facebook and our Instagram, we are quite active on. And weekly, we like to do different surprise site. We feature different surprise site visits of folks that we're working with around town. So you get to see kind of, hey, we're doing regulatory work, but look at this really cool story behind this building or this site. And then we also do things like, hey, guess what this site is based on these clues of this historic photo. And it's been really interesting to get people. Yeah, that's been a really popular one lately. So, come, even if you're not familiar with the Tallahassee area, just come join us on Facebook and come see what we're up to. And quite soon, we were fortunate enough to have Tristan serve as one of our Preservation Award judges last year. In the fall, we did our Historic Preservation Awards, which we do for all of North Florida. And we have those every few years. And Tallahassee's coming up on our bicentennial celebration in 2024. So we're going to be doing probably our next preservation awards then, hopefully in May. And so we will be soliciting projects that have addressed historic preservation. We do all things from education to rehabilitation to all sorts of topics. Student topics, student presentations, all sorts of things. So Tristan was awesome and served as a judge for that, and we'll be having that come up in the next year. So, folks, stay tuned or get in touch with us if you have anything you want us to see in the area. We would love to.
Absolutely. And we'll make sure whenever we put this up on our YouTube channel that we'll link to all those things, to your websites, to all the social media handles that you have. We'll make sure to link to all those. I did notice, Tristan, that in your, were you in a well? Is that what you,
yeah,
was that where you found this?
In the well. Yeah.
Oh, wow. And of course, wells are Tristan is an archaeologist. So of course, that's one of your favorite places to hang out, right? Is in a well.
That or the outhouse.
And why is that?
Okay.
Because people throw a lot of weird things down them, like a lot of garbage and stuff ends up in there, and then you can learn a lot about people that way.
Yeah, and you can find artifacts that you can now put in your museum.
Exactly.
In the adaptive reuse that's happening in Tallahassee with the waterworks, there is a massive, I don't know, Tristan, if you're familiar with it, cistern on the property there. Yeah, it's huge. And I've always wanted to get in there and see what they have going around. So I'm fascinated by what you're doing.
Yeah, and you finished the main quest, and we're like almost right at
Good
our
timing.
hour. So this is like the perfect timing. This may be the best time
You're hired.
we've ever
Rehired.
But not as maybe as like the the manager, maybe not so much as the person actually doing the work.
Yeah, I'll hire people to do the work for me.
You subcontract.
There we go.
Yeah. Well, it's
this
been
is the
awesome.
fastest I've ever seen a museum get together.
Right?
So.
Yeah, this is like record time, and you didn't even have to like go and get stuff on loan. You just found stuff around the building and put it on display. Kept it local. That's a good thing.
And definitely recorded exactly where it all came from.
And definitely not dropping it off the or
throwing it around, no.
Or scratching it with metal tools, nothing like that.
None of that, no.
And so, Shannon, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. This has been a lot of fun. And then the last thing we always end with these programs is we'll start with Shannon and then we'll go to Tristan. Shannon, what did you think of this game kind of overall in terms of like giving people an idea of what historic preservation is?
I think it's really cool for the hands-on side of it, getting to see the actual materials. Maybe we could tweak some of the processes a little bit, but it looks like it's made for helping people appreciate, that these materials are different and that these places are special and that they do deserve care. So I give it 2 thumbs up for that.
2 thumbs up from Shannon. How about you, Tristan? What's your impression? I know this is also just a demo, so
Sure.
it'd be cool, to see kind of other buildings too.
Yeah, no, it's for what it is. I think it does a pretty decent job. Like Shannon said, there are some things I would like to see changed, but by and large, kind of looking at how these things go, and of course you have to simplify it a bit to make it a game as well. But I think it came together pretty nice little demo.
What did you think of the mechanics? Was it pretty easy to control this one?
I had a little trouble figuring out what exactly to do. Sometimes some visual cues and stuff were a little off, but as far as like moving around, it's pretty easy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Not bad.
Cool. Well, and if the developers ever need some voice actors, they can find some real authentic voices. Just reach out to us, and we'll be your voice actors. Maybe if you're going to pay us, of course, or maybe. And then Shannon, I know you mentioned the awards. Is that something that anybody can? How does that process? Can people nominate for the preservation awards?
So we are kind of in between right now. We don't have it announced on our website, but if you stay tuned to our social media, coming up within the next few months, we'll be putting out a call for nominations. So anything that's been done over probably the last 4 years, folks can start thinking about in the North Florida area and get in touch with us. And we would love to check out your project.
Awesome. Well, that's fantastic. Again, everybody check out Tallahassee Trust for Historic Preservation. We will put all those links to the website, to all the social media handles on our YouTube channel. Once we put this episode up, this is going to be episode number 45. So we hope to have, I don't think we've got any more episodes. We've kind of been working on doing a couple more here soon, but we don't have anything set on the calendar just yet. So if you don't already follow us on Twitch, if you do that, then it will notify you when we go live again. Of course, we always put these episodes up on our YouTube channel. It's just Florida Public Archaeology Network. You can go check that out on YouTube. And for the Archaeology Arcade playlist, this is where this episode will be at, and all the other 44 episodes we've done to date. So thanks again for joining us. Tristan, anything else? Did I forget something?
Yes. Make sure you like and subscribe.
Oh, yeah. Like and subscribe. We're supposed to say that. And like and subscribe to Tallahassee Trust for Historic Preservation. Engage. That's the best way to support them.
Yep.
Thank you guys so much.
All right. Thank you all.
All right. See y'all later.